Hello and welcome to the show Awakening here on WGSN-DB, the Going Bold and Going Solo Network. The information and the opinions expressed on the show are just that, the information and opinions of the individual speaking based on their individual personal experiences. They are not intended to diagnose and do not constitute professional advice or recommendations. So you know that pain, the stress, the struggle of divorcing men and women as they go through their divorce. Well, there is a way to find peace and sanity and assist their attorney in this process, lowering the cost and lowering the stress of the divorce through the process. My name's Tina Huggins. I'm your divorce coach and specialist, divorce planning specialist, restorative family mediator, and conflictual co-parenting coach. And it's kind of interesting because I could have read that little part of me and just put Melissa's name in there because, as you will see, Melissa and I have a lot in common. So my guest today is Melissa Schwartzman. Did I say that right, Melissa?
You did.
Very good, because I forgot to ask. So Melissa has over 25 years of experience and is dedicated and compassionate and is a dedicated and compassionate professional who specializes in helping individuals and couples navigate the complex emotions and decisions that come with relationships, divorce, and co-parenting. Drawing on a blend of clinical therapy, conflict resolution strategies, and personal coaching, Melissa offers a holistic approach to addressing both the emotional and the practical aspects of relationship challenges. As a couples therapist, Melissa works with partners to improve communication, strengthen their bond, and overcome obstacles, whether they are seeking to rebuild their relationship or make the difficult decision to part ways. In divorce mediation, Melissa helps couples move through separation with mutual respect and collaboration, guiding them towards fair and peaceful resolution. In addition to her expertise in divorce mediation, Melissa is also highly experienced in individual divorce coaching. She works one-on-one with clients to provide emotional support, clarity, and practical guidance through the divorce process. Melissa helps individuals navigate the overwhelming decisions surrounding separation, personal growth, and new beginnings. Her professional experience in human resources supports clients who are experiencing workplace challenges or looking to make career changes. Her compassionate, tailored approach helps individuals, couples, and families thrive during transition and beyond. So hello, and thank you for being here with me today, Melissa.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. We have so much to discuss.
Yes, and I'm excited for us to get started. But before we get started, I want our viewers to understand that it's super important for you to pick the right mediator, the right divorce coach, the right therapist when you are looking for that person to fit. You need to have somebody that fits you and feels right for you. So, and this is important because if you looked over Melissa and I's stuff, our names could almost transpose, except for her therapy. She has a clinical background. And so I want to make sure that you understand, as our viewers, she stands out because of her clinical background. So when you're looking for somebody, and as I read there, with compassion, she definitely fits that word and that surrounding of helping you in a compassionate way because she has that clinical background that so many of us other divorce coaches don't. My background comes from a whole different direction than hers. So I wanted to make sure, as our viewers, that you understood just what makes Melissa special. So, Melissa, as you step into the spotlight here, kind of tell us why you got involved in relationship everything here.
Absolutely. So I actually come from a personal perspective of why I got involved with helping people through divorce because I went through one myself. So not only do I understand it from my clinical training, as Tina had pointed out, but I also know what it feels like to live it. So I think that unique combination of understanding it from a clinical perspective, but knowing what it's like every step of the way really is helpful. So really, in my private practice, couples were really my niche. And I found that people were making decisions. It wasn't always healthy to stay together. And people were like, well, what do I do next if I'm going to decide not to? So people were asking for my help with that. So I really needed to really understand all of the steps, all of the processes. That's what kind of got me involved to be an accredited mediator. And then when I'm not helping from the mediation perspective, as a coach, I'm helping people get prepared for mediation. But why I really got into it is because I think divorce brings up so many emotions, and people really sometimes feel so paralyzed. This life I knew for so long, what am I going to do? And I feel like it's so compelled to help people through that because I felt the same way. And I know that it's hard to see it at first, but there really is an opportunity to really think about how your life can be better, different. I even go as far to say transformed. So I'm in it to be answering your question, but I get so passionate about it all. I got in it to really help people really see how they can change their lives and how it can be different. And divorce can sometimes be a way to change for a positive way.
Yes, yes. And so just like you, I mean, I've been through a divorce. I was divorced 22 years ago, and then most of our viewers know that I lost my husband a year ago. And going back through the emotions, you talk about the emotions, going back through the emotions of the loss of my husband, I was a zombie, just a zombie. I was walking around like a zombie, thinking like a zombie, sitting like a zombie, not eating like a zombie might. And then I think back to my divorce 22 years ago, and I attempted suicide. It's 6 months after I chose to leave. So that emotional turmoil was off the charts back then. Comparing that, I wouldn't want to go through either of them again, but I can tell you that that divorce, it almost took my life. It almost took my children's mother away from them. So having somebody like you, and I so wished that back then, one, I would have reached out for help because it took me 15 years to get back on my feet. And that shouldn't happen. And two, that there were people like you that I could have reached out to and said, please help me, guide me through this. Tell me what I need to do next.
Tina, I think that is so profound and so much courage for you to be sharing this with everybody because you want people to not fall into the same way that you
Exactly.
did. It is so important to realize that you're not alone in this, right? And asking for help and support so that you don't get in such a dire way, right? This is a life or death situation you're talking about, literally, right?
Right.
So
Right.
and I think it's important. A lot of times when people go through a divorce, right, they first want to reach out to family and friends. And not that family and friends can't help, but they can't help in the same way, right, that somebody can help that has this training, especially if it gets to the point where you're really feeling like you don't want to be here. A family or a friend might not be able to help in that way to really know what needs to happen in a very severe crisis situation. Another thing that I think is important is to get that help, but also engaging with other people that are going through the same thing. There is really such value in that. I run divorce support groups regularly. I have virtual ones, and then in my town, I run a local one. And the real value in that is as you're getting help from others around you, you're giving help. So it's this
Hmm.
reciprocal thing. I sit there and it runs itself, right? I'm like mediating it kind of, right? Collaborating it, but people are like, well, yeah, when that happened to me, I did this. And somebody's like, wow, wow, I didn't think about that. I even have people like exchanging lawyers because they're like, well, I've talked to six of them and I don't think it's worth, or you know what? Your case sounds really simple. You could do this or that. So I think the key thing we're talking about now is support. You have to get support. You are not alone in this. Underscore, neon light flashing. this is not something you do alone. And you need a whole team in terms of, we'll talk about maybe some other professional supports, but the clinical support, the people that are going through it as support, and of course, still your friends and family, but everybody offers a different way of support. All are critical.
And back when I went through my little situation there, I didn't have the support of my family because I was coming out of abuse. And one of the things that us that have been in abuse don't do is we don't tell our family
Right.
for different kinds of reasons. Maybe we don't want them to know we are getting abused. But in my case, and in a lot of people in abuse situations case, we don't, or I didn't want my family to look negative at him. I
Right.
didn't want that. And in hindsight, I really hurt myself because when I left him, it looked like I left him for another man because I did. I moved in with another man. I had handpicked him. He was sober in AA because I just needed the alcohol out of the outskirts of my life. Too much of that. And so family wasn't there, but oftentimes, and I just recently had a client tell me, yeah, one of my best friends just chewed my case and hung up on me. We can't like bleed all over the table, throw up with our best friend over and over and over and expect them to just get it and be there for us. Or the other side of that is that they add fuel to the hatred and the emotional distress in that abusive relationship only because they care, but it causes problems. So I love the fact that people, and I often tell people, you know, you need to go to marriage counseling, and they'll say, but why? Because if you can talk now, talking as you divorce is going to make the process so much easier.
100%. So many things that you said are so important. First of all, right? People are in abusive situations. They're always trying to protect their abuser. And they also have a lot of shame in what's going on. So anybody who's listening, who's in that situation, please know that you need to speak up and get help for yourself. And there's many anonymous ways that you can do that because you don't want to keep having that cycle. You want to get out of it. And then, like we said, relying on your friends, sometimes they're going to reach their breaking point. So as we mentioned, getting some of those supports, get them quickly. And I think it's important to realize what you're saying. You know, you have to get that counseling. So, because in some cases, right, maybe there aren't children involved, but if you're going to still have to figure out how you're parting ways with that individual, and if you can get out some of those unresolved issues or figure out how, in a best way possible, to resolve some of the things that you'll have to through a divorce emotionally, and then there's some of the tangible things that have to be done, it'll be much better for everybody. And then, of course, when there's kids involved, it's really, really important, right, to not lose sight of needing to put the kids first. And then there's not only the first piece we talked about, which is the emotional unpacking of what you need to do to separate ways for a divorce and some of the other tangible things like assets and things. But then when there's kids involved, we need to make sure that they're not getting the brunt of the divorce. And it's really important that we prepare them for what has to, because once you're divorced, you're still parents. And that's another really, really tricky scenario.
Yes, yes. And being able to co-parent together. Most of my, you know, I wish that I had dealing with clients like what you're dealing with. I choose to go to the high conflict side. I choose to go to that side with abuse. And so my people are unable for a long time to be able to safely communicate with the other. But one of the things that I stress is that once we can set our boundaries and we can start working towards things, we may not be able to co-parent, but we can parallel parent, and we can parallel parent in an awesome way. And it works really well for the kids. So I love the fact that in your scenario, that they can go to you as a couple and work through some of the issues that may be able to keep them together. Because just because we call ourselves a divorce coach doesn't mean that we're here to help you just get a divorce. We're here to help you navigate the process of thinking about it from the beginning.
Right. Absolutely. But I think that's so important. So in your case too, right? At least you're having the same end goal, right? Is to have people be able to have the kids have a better situation with an outcome. So you're working with people individually to do this parallel process. But so important because we see so many times that kids get caught in it, and unfortunately the abuse sometimes lives on, right? And you see that, right? Because if there was an
Mhm,
abuser, right, that we see that that sometimes carries on. And sometimes we have two abusers, right? Sometimes we have two abusers in the relationships. And that's a really hard thing because there's
mhm.
really no escaping that
And
scenario.
yeah, and it is hard. It's hard to escape that because now we got two high conflict individuals in there. In my case, I rarely will get the high conflict person reach out. In all the years I have done this work, I've only had one high conflict person, and he was reaching out to me to make his wife do what he wanted her to do, which I didn't take him on as a client for obvious reasons. But I think something super important to let you as the viewers know is that you can get to a place where you set these boundaries and stop some of that, especially the verbal and emotional abuse, because you'll no longer accept it and allow them to touch those buttons. And so if they can't do it, eventually they're just going to back off and eventually die off and stop doing that.
That's always the shocker when the person flips the tables
Mm-hmm.
and the person who's always seen that they were the ones in control, when they see that they're not anymore and that they can't have the same control and then that dynamic, it's very interesting to see what happens. It's
Mm-hmm.
very hard. They can't tolerate that. And when they realize that they're losing some of the control, they really try to fight back harder. And if the
Mm-hmm.
other person stands their ground, flips the dynamic, they really see that they can't have that same control anymore. But it takes a while because the person who was always the person who was submissive sometimes won't do it and sometimes won't do it consistently. But when they do, it's really interesting to sit back and watch and see that person take that strength back for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the healing.
I had one of my clients give me a really great way to help the other client see things. So she was telling me through a conversation, she says, well, sometimes in our marriage, I had to have a persona of who I was. So I had to be this like Xena or warrior princess person, and I had to visualize myself that way. So specifically with that client, that's what she has a special name for that persona. And so I'll say, you need to step into her and you need to be her today. This is where we need you today as you head into this meeting with your attorney and your soon to be ex. And it's helped a great deal in that specific situation. And sometimes that's kind of what it takes. We need to be somebody we're not yet able to be. We need to pretend for a minute.
Exactly. And I think that's what happens in a lot of these situations, especially in abusive situations, right? You have these sort of other kind of alter egos, right? That you're playing in these different situations and you lose a lot of yourself.
Hmm.
And part of the work is who are you at what time and who are you going to be if you are lucky enough to kind of get out of that abusive cycle? Who
Hmm.
were you before? And then who are you after? Right?
Right.
It's a lot of work.
Hmm. You know, just kind of going back over what you said about just that, it's a lot of work and it takes a good amount of time to get there. I'm a living example of how I was able to set my boundaries and stop my husband. He wasn't really being abusive. At the point that I left, the love bombing started. But then the control part came from he would go to visit my dad. And then he would always call and tell me how my dad was and how he had this coffee with my dad every Saturday and blah, blah, blah. And then he would always go and check on my mom. He would just tell her, I'm just stopping just to check on you. And as soon as I started setting these boundaries, and as soon as my parents started seeing the abusive side of him, it took time, but pretty soon, because he was calling me no less than 4 times a week after I left for 4 years, no less
Wow.
than 4 times a week. And after, because it took that amount of time, not to get the divorce, but for me to get the strength to file for divorce. And once I was able to set my boundaries and able to keep them, I mean, he stopped calling altogether. I didn't hear from him for several years in a row, actually. And now we're able to go to our son's wedding last year, where we were able to have a civil conversation. He's with his new wife. Her and I had a civil conversation, and everything was good. So I am living proof that what Melissa is saying can happen.
Well, bravo, right? You took back the control.
Hmm.
You set boundaries and you showed him that you're flipping the dynamic, right? He's
Yeah.
trying to do all these things, you're not having it.
Hmm. And the difference between the 4 years that it took me and how long it'll take you as a viewer, if you reach out and get help, it's not going to take you 4 years. You're going to be able to do it within a year. It might take longer for the other side to realize that they no longer have any control, but within a year, you're going to start to see a shift and a difference. Now, if you have kids, it's a little bit different story. Sometimes they use the kids in that aspect. And that is something that both Melissa and I are trained to help you deal with.
Yes. That's when it really becomes because but when that phases to that, when they realize they can't get to you, then they're really going to get where it counts, right? Because then they're say this is the best next level that they can really try. And that's really when it gets really hard because
Mhm.
then you're like, wait, now I'll take anything that comes my way, right? That he can do anything or she can do anything to me, but not my kid. So that's when you have the really next layer of defense. But it's sort of the same tactic still, because when there's no response and they can't get the reaction, they still will back off. So it's extra hard to do it, but the results will be the same. When there's no response, no reaction, it's not as fun.
Hmm.
Not
Right. And it
fulfilling.
isn't. It isn't. And one of the things, we're talking about how they use the kids in the background there. The thing that we stressed when I read Melissa's bio is that she helps with communication. And when we work with people on communication, especially as the parent, it's not just with communicating to the other side. It's how to communicate to that child too.
Absolutely. I mean, and the various ages really has a big impact too. So you have a very small child, let's say under 6, right? They can't really totally understand everything that's happening. But you have child who's like a young adult, maybe even 10, 12. They start to see everything that's happening. Sometimes they start to speak up for themselves, right? But they know how much they can speak up without backlash. And then they start to know what the manipulation looks like. So it's really interesting to kind of know based on the developmental cycle how much impact is the kid is have by this manipulative parent. And sometimes that manipulation runs out faster. But very small kids, right? It really can be very hard because they don't even know they're being manipulated.
Yeah.
So,
And they don't.
and they're doing things that if they really knew what they were doing to the other parent, they probably would not.
Hmm. Hmm. And I'm here in the next several weeks, I'm going to be putting on a workshop with another divorce coach that I work with. And I've asked her because she's a parent of 2 little girls, and she divorced a narcissistic person that uses these little girls and tries to manipulate them from the background to get a hold of mom. And she has learned how to talk to these little girls to the point that the little girls now go, oh, that's just daddy throwing his fit, or however they say it. That's not what mommy has taught them. Mommy goes through and she asks questions, just like we as coaches are trained. And then they answer their own questions about things. And so now the little girls are able to say, that doesn't mean anything. He just said that and it doesn't mean anything. She's really helping them get an emotional IQ, a real high IQ.
That's so I think that's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Like to like work backwards, right? To not
Mm-hmm.
like get angry, to not like try to fight him, but to knowledge is power, like to empower these girls to know. And this is such great for like raising young ladies, right? To really be independent young women for everything they'll encounter. Or even because we know, unfortunately, things cycle out, right? Often we pick mates later that mirror our parents' dynamic, right? Or the opposite sex parent. So we could see this replicating itself, but she's maybe helping that to not happen by making these young girls aware.
And I really do see that. I see that with
Uh-huh.
young
All the
girls
time.
and being able to give love to your children when they come home and say, daddy or mommy said this nasty thing about you. Um, and being able to say, to ask the child, so what do you think about that? Do you think I am that? And the child gets to recycle that statement over and over in their head until they've rolled the rocks to the point that they're smooth and shiny.
And I think that's great because normally what would happen, right, is that then that other parent would probably shoot off all these texts like, "How dare you be speaking to me about the with the other parent? You know that that's the cardinal rule. You don't speak anything
Right,
about the
right.
other parent, blah 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 blah." Right? But that gets anybody absolutely nowhere, right? Because the parent who does it is going to repeatedly do it if they're doing it already. And we said again. Usually the abusive, narcissistic person, that's exactly what they wanted, right? It was almost
Mm,
like planted to have it happen. But what we really want is to have the children not be in the middle or really understand how they're taking in these messages they're receiving. And this is a great way to like flesh it out and to also start realizing that this isn't a healthy thing for another parent to doing. And then they're kind of like, aha, this isn't healthy. My other parent is doing this and I know this isn't good.
hmm And they're
So,
able to get to that on their own
yes,
without the parent pointing that out.
right, exactly. So then they come to their own conclusions and they start to realize that this is not a healthy behavior that my parent is doing and modeling. And so no good and something that I'm gonna not really try to fall for, and then something that I know is not healthy if I encounter it in a different way with other people.
hmm hmm So let's kind of take a slight shift and go into your mediation. So kind of tell us a little bit how you go through mediation.
Absolutely. So I really think that when people say they're getting divorced, one of the first thing they say is, I gotta go get a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
Not absolutely untrue, right? But I think you got to think about really how you want to settle your divorce, right? So you can go and litigate your divorce, but there are some benefits to mediation. So you can have a lawyer. When I mediate, I usually say in most cases you should have a lawyer because you want to have somebody that's going to kind of be looking at what's happening. So when I get a mediation client, right, we're going to do all the areas of a typical MSA in the divorce. We're going to look at if there are kids, right? We need to have a custody legal, right? That's all making all the legal decisions, medical decisions. But we need a parenting plan, like who's residing at whose house, how many days a week, and all those things. Then we need support. Is there going to be spousal support? And then if there's children, are we going to have child support? And then also we need, if there are any assets, right? We need to look at what's called equitable distribution. Now, all states are different, so I'm speaking generally here because it varies by state. And those are like kind of the main components. Now, the benefits of mediation are that it's confidential, right? So when you have a litigation, everything is open for public record. Usually, if you can not be so high conflict, there are some high conflict couples that I've dealt with in mediation, but a mediator's there as a neutral party with the end result of resolving all those issues that I said in a way that they're serving both people. So, as a lawyer is representing each individual, the mediator is a neutral party who understands the law of the state and is trying to get them to come to an agreement on the matters we discussed. So it's usually less costly because if you can get to the heart of the matters and you can really understand what each party wants, and there's negotiation involved, right? So if someone's saying, I want the beach house, I want the beach house, okay, well, what are you gonna give up then for that? We call it equitable because it's not always half and half. But really the benefits are that you can really kind of save some time, some money, and usually the end result is that you get it done in a swifter way. So when I help people, when I'm the mediator, I really not going to listen to like he said, she said, you did this, you did that. It's not an emotional. So I'm not the clinician therapist listening to all the emotional matters. However, I will say what distinguishes me as a mediator from lawyer mediators is that there is that compassionate side that I am applying some of that where I will say, let's remember, we want to make sure that we're coming with a parenting agreement that you're actually going to be able to do, right? We don't want to make a parenting agreement that then neither one is able to carry out emotionally and do. So we send some reminders out. And then in the coaching aspect, right, I help prepare people for mediation so that nobody walks away from the mediation and says, wow, I really wanted that, or I should have gotten that. So you really want to make sure you're prepared when you walk in there. But it's really a really good way that you can get through your divorce process a little swifter in a more economical way. But you still should consult a lawyer to make sure that you're on the right track because you don't want to have a mediation and then get the what's called a memorandum of understanding. And then your lawyer says, what did you do here? None of this makes sense. And then it blows up. So,
Mhm. Yeah, so I'm trained just a little bit different than you, and mine is restorative. So
yes, so tell us.
I could work to bring a couple together, but so as I help a couple separate, my purpose or job there is to help them separate as two wholes as
Okay.
opposed to two halves. And and so that works great if we have two people that are able to be in the same room and there's not, any abuse that's been going on. But in most of the cases there is. So there's shuttle mediation, which, I do mine over Zoom. So then we have one Zoom room here and another Zoom room over here, and I just take the information back and forth. And I do also recommend in my clients, they're going to need an attorney. Now, when they bring on that attorney is another time frame. I tell my clients you don't need the attorney right away in the beginning unless I go through this stuff with him and then realize, ooh, we've got something here with this business that we need some legal advice for. But we keep the lawyer out of there as long as possible and then bring the lawyer in when it's time for the actual legal process to start. But in the mediation process, when I have lawyers present, we do what's called a fishbowl. So my clients get to talk, but the lawyers don't. And the reason for that is because it saves time. And we only have 2 to 4 hours, depending on the situation. And we need as much time as possible to get as much ground covered as possible. And so if the lawyer needs to talk to the clients, then they just ask for permission. We take a break and I basically leave the Zoom room and they talk. And then I give them, 5 minutes and then I come back in and we just go. But at that point, then both clients get to talk to their attorneys. And
Okay.
you can bring anybody else in you want, but it's a fishbowl effect. And the only time I bring other people in, or maybe even the attorneys, is when we've reached an impasse. And they're both demanding their side. So then I bring the other people in because I'm trained in basically the Indian talking stick method. Um,
Oh,
then I ask each person, okay, we're trying to separate this out. If this was you, what kind of suggestions would you give? And each person gets to give a suggestion.
I love that. So it's really apparent that like obviously the end result is the same, right? You're coming out with an outcome that's going to suit best parties and you're going to resolve the divorce, but it's interesting how it is. And I think another similarity is I think it's called a caucus, right? In the my mediation model. So
Mhm.
also I do a lot by Zoom too, which sometimes if it's a little heated, right, like the people are not actually sitting next to each other a lot. But if there is something that's like unresolved, like in the Zoom room, right, we'll go with the other person and kind of say, okay, so what are you thinking if there's a contentious thing about maybe about selling the house? Okay, so tell me what your thoughts are on this, and then I'll go with the other person, and then we'll come back together in the Zoom to do it. So there's some similarities, but I definitely understand like with the very abusive situations, it definitely has a definite kind of component that highlights differently for sure.
Mhm. And most of my mediations are actually done with families. They're not so much divorce mediations. So we are working to try and keep a family as a whole, which is very much like you do as a therapist. Um, Usually in our case, because I work with the state of Minnesota,
Right.
and what we do is we've got a single parent trying to parent a teenager that's in trouble, or we've got parents, a blended family, are trying their very best, but their teenager is in trouble. And so
Yes.
we've got to find a way to help the parents parent. And that's how we do it, is through this type of mediation.
Well, it's so important, but it's so hard to, I'm sure it's very hard to see, right, the impact on these teens, right? Because what a result of some of the parents, right, and what the how they grew up and all these impacts and the result of that. And I hope that the parents, in some ways, don't always take accountability for that, which makes it even harder, right, when you get them all together to try to salvage what you can with this family. I'm sure it's really hard. And so you
Yeah,
do great work. I mean, really, really impressive work. And it's really so important, the work you
we're
do.
attempting this. This is,
Yeah. But at
it,
least you're doing it, right?
yes. Well, and our organization does it. I mean, the organization has no problems. It's just when it's heartbreaking when a parent just can't bring themselves to parent. They're too tired, they're drinking too much, whatever that might be. It's just heartbreaking to us because then we have to relieve ourselves of this family and turn them back over to the state, which now the child may go to juvie and or the parent may end up in jail.
Right. That the impacts are really difficult. And
Mhm.
it changes people's lives for could be for forever, right? The impacts could be
Definitely,
life
definitely.
changing.
It's just like you brought up that divorce can be, you said this in the very beginning, that it can be a positive thing. And, as you say that, I want to emphasize here, I get to be an example of that. I married the most wonderful man on the planet. Almost, well, it was 8 years ago that we met and we got together. And he was the most wonderful thing to me. We lived together, traveled together, worked together. We were together 24/7 and still had date night every Friday night. It's possible. Just like Melissa had said earlier, it's something so horrible as divorce can move into something so beautiful as a new life.
Yeah. I believe it. I've seen it. I too have been divorced a long time. I've been divorced 18 years. This happened a long time ago, 1.5. And I actually didn't get involved in doing all the divorce stuff till more, recently in my clinical work and other things. It kind of really came as like the need for it. So I know a lot of people sometimes do it right after they get divorced. I kind of did it later past my divorce. But I work with people all the time who think that their life isn't going to be better. And I think that's one of the most rewarding things is that people that I started working with for like so downtrodden, didn't see like anything good. Like people have been married 30 years, right? a lot of times, and they said this is what they knew. Some people had like stopped working, devoted themselves to their family, and they're like, I'm never going to have anything now. And I'm like, let's just wait and see. Let's see what inspires you. Let's see what we're going to do. And then they like think about things that they've always wanted to do but never did because they were giving to everybody. And then we start lighting a fire. And then sometimes a little later on, like you said, they might find somebody then they're for them that's like a nice partner. And then they're ignited again. Some of them like have this sexual energy again. Like they were
Mhm.
obviously weren't having any intimacy with their like marriage, and now they're like, wow, I'm on fire. Like, I mean, there are some things that happen, right?
Right, right. And the fun part is like in you or in my case, we get to see that. We get to hear those stories. It's so much fun. So we're coming to the end here.
Okay.
So I would like, I mean, all of your contact information is going to be below here in the
Okay.
show notes. But can you tell people how they can reach you?
Absolutely. So my website is www.melissabethcounseling.com. And then you can find me if you want to send me an email, melissabethcounseling@gmail.com.
So very good. So just for you viewers that don't already know, I'm a certified divorce coach, just like Melissa is, meaning that I'm trained in the complexities of divorce. I've also been through an abusive relationship. My father was almost murdered in an abusive relationship, and my late husband was tortured in his abusive relationship. So not only have I been trained, I've witnessed and experienced that part too. There is a way out. All you have to do is reach out. You can reach me through my email at coachtinalyn@gmail.com. That's CoachTinaLynn@gmail.com. My website is divorcecoachspecialist.com. You can find me on social media. Facebook, I'm under Tina Lynn Huggins, Huggins. LinkedIn, I'm under Tina Huggins. On Instagram, I'm under Divorce Coach Tina Lynn. And on TikTok, you can find me under Divorce Tina. So can you give our viewers a last little bit of advice for our viewers, please, Melissa?
Absolutely. I think the most important thing is to know you're not alone in this. Don't feel like whatever's going on that you have no one to reach out to. I'll remind you again, right? Finding a therapist that can help you, finding a community resource, finding any support groups, or finding anything that's related to your specific question. You know how to find me now. I'm here. You know how to find Tina now. We're here from you. And it's never too late to get started. So again, don't go it alone, and it's never too late to change your life.
That's good advice. I like that it's never too late because, so often I know with abused people, they get in here and they're like, I don't have the money, I don't have a place, I don't have a job, I don't. So they stay and they stay way too long. I stayed way too long. And when we stay way too long, we just get beat down more to the point that, yes, we can't leave because there's nothing left of us to leave. But like Melissa just said, it's never too late. Reach out, ask for help. What may seem totally impossible to you, we can help you pull the blinders away and help you see the possibilities. So that's my bit of advice. Reach out. We offer our consultation, our first consultation free. If we can't help you, we'll give you some advice that can maybe send you in a direction that you can find the help you need.
I like that, Tina. I think I'd add, and I think you're saying it, there's always a way. Always a way.
Amen. Amen. So many people, like you heard me talk just a little while ago, when we're in divorce, we get to that suicidal ideation. I don't want you to be alone during that time because being alone is not a safe place. I know I was there alone. So I urge you to reach out to the National Suicide Prevention number, and that is 988. It's the same number here as it is in Canada, 988. And in the Netherlands, it's 113. So you can get that support right now and talk to somebody while you're sitting on the ledge. Let them talk you off that ledge because you're going to leave your loved one behind and they're going to be the ones who hurt. So if you are in need of a police officer now, Here in the States, it's 911. It's also the same in Canada, 911. It's 999 in the Netherlands and 112 in the UK. And so get the police there, press charges. This is your key out of the abuse. Once you press those charges, they have to leave the home. And you don't ever want to drop those charges. You want to follow those charges through. This is your time to start the divorce proceedings. This is a safe moment in your life. Don't drop the charges. Oftentimes, the abuse that was before the charges will be much worse if you drop the charges. You can also call the domestic violence hotline at 800-799-7233. That number again is 800-799-7233. Talk with somebody. Get them on the line and let them kind of guide you for this moment. If you're in this place, if you're hiding next to the bed, under the bed, in the closet, call them. They'll be able to help you. And if you are unable to call 911, they can assist you with that. So please reach out for that kind of help. I also urge you to like, comment, and share this so that it can help other people. Thank you so much, Melissa, for being here today. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
Great. And I wish all of our viewers well. Thank you.